Boy, if that don't make you happy, boy, I'm about to do a lap tour around the house. That just gets me all happy and praising God, amen. That was by the Rochesters. He knows my name, and I believe he certainly does. He knows y'all's out there, and I believe he knows everybody, every baby that's born. I believe he'd know their name. I'm glad he knows mine, and I know his, finally. But yeah, I was mowing the grass today, and a song came on. I played some gospel radio, and I don't even know the name of the song, but I almost had to stop, and it just got me all choked up and everything. I don't remember the exact line, but it's something like, what have I done that would cause Christ to die for my sin? I just paraphrase. I can't remember how exactly worded, but that's just, I could work that way, and it's close enough. But what have I done to cause him to love me enough to go to the cross? And I done nothing. I done nothing. I mean, I'm just a sinner. I didn't do anything to produce enough love for him to do and bear my sin and die a horrible death, and being nailed to the cross. His hands, his feet, crown of thorns, which probably went into his skull. I mean, it's just a horrible thing. I didn't do anything. I mean, that just tore me up. I mean, I didn't stop mowing, but I almost had to. I mean, that just tore me up, folks. None of us done anything. Christ chose to do what he done. He chose to. We're not lovable before or after salvation. You know, we don't deserve it at any point in our living life to deserve what he done for us. Okay, and they're about to knock that camera over. But yeah, that was a great song. This was a great song, but I don't want to hold us up too long getting all emotional on that and everything. But anyways, that was Rochester's. He knows my name. So we're going to finish the lesson we started last night in Obadiah, verses 1 through 9. And he's going to really get to the nitty-gritty. I enjoyed last night's lesson. But I'll go ahead and read those, get out the way, and we'll get started, okay? Get your King James Bible, and here we go. Verse number 1. The vision of Obadiah. Thus saith the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee, and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mountain of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed, to the end that every one of the mountain of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. All right, so we should take care of these today in this lesson and finish it up. All right, and here's Justin Johnson. I'm right back here watching with you.
Of their own hands. And so this judgment's coming as a result of their works. If they would bless God's nation, if they would be thankful to God, as Romans 1 describes, if they would glorify God as God, there's no fear at this judgment here. Okay? And yet the truth is that since the beginning of the world, Romans chapter 1 describes, people have not glorified God as God. They haven't been thankful to Him. They have not come to Him through His chosen people. They have rejected God and opposed Him all along the way. And as a result of that, judgment will come. Okay? And so this has been the same message from the beginning that we all preach. Back to Obadiah, finally. Let's get back to Obadiah and see what he's saying here. So with all this introduction into God's judgment, why he gives judgment, when he's giving judgment, and how he's giving judgment to the nations, Obadiah, verse 1, he's calling to the heathens and says, rise against Edom in battle. Rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. For thou art greatly despised. And so Edom, who we saw last week, was a nation created before Israel, and they were a nation growing in influence and power. God has made them small among the nations now because they're greatly despised. What's going on is God is going to bring them low. Okay, they set themselves up. They've set themselves as an authority. When Israel came to Edom through the wilderness, Edom was more powerful than Israel. Okay, as far as the numbers, as far as the influence and the authority. Of course, God was with Israel, and that was the difference. Okay, and so God says here, I've made thee small among the heathen, compared to me. Right, thou art greatly despised, despised in their rulership, despised in who they are. Even though they wanted to be the foremost nation, like every nation today wants to be, they're greatly despised because the way they achieved this power, and we'll read about this next week as well, is not through righteousness. It's not through a holy way. Back in Proverbs, it describes that there are two ways that rulers get control over people, and there is a righteous way and an unrighteous way. Okay, And we've all experienced one or the other or both in our lifetimes. Proverbs 29, verse 2 says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked bears rule, the people mourn. Okay? When there's an unrighteous ruler, when someone usurps power deceptively and doesn't do it according to righteous means, the subjects don't like it. Okay? We've seen this throughout history. But when there's a righteous ruler, a righteous king, there's no worry of being subject to this guy. Okay? Edom here apparently is being despised because of their unrighteous dealings. Their betrayals, their confederacies, the conspiracies against Israel, against God, their sins has caused them to have power, but in an unrighteous way. Okay? And so they're causing problems, and they're greatly despised here. And so what God is doing in the case of Edom here, when he's calling the nations against her, what he is quite literally doing is creating a revolution against an unrighteous rule. He is enforcing justice. Just a few years ago, people celebrated the Arab Springs, right, where the people revolted. In America, we celebrate our own revolution, where we cast off the bonds of England and that sort of thing. And very rarely is someone against one of these types of revolutions throwing off oppression, all right, because they declare the tyrannies of their rulers, they throw off the chains of bondage, and yay, everyone's free and happy and peaceful, right? This is what's going on here. They're despised in their authority and their leadership, and what God is doing here is destroying their power. And how is he doing that? By causing other nations to come against them, the heathen to come against them, is going to destroy them. Okay? So if they had gotten this position by right, if they had gotten this position by a right means, there would not have been this problem. Okay? If they had gotten here by blessing God's people instead of cursing them, there wouldn't have been this problem, you see. But they were greatly despised, verse 2 says. And so God here is seeking true justice. Again, I'm trying to paint this picture, present the perspective from God's viewpoint that he is dealing justice here. Okay? It is not from the Edomites where, hey, we finally made it, we're a nation, because they got there through corruption. They got there through cursing God. That's not the way you get there. Okay? And so they're greatly despised in verse 2. Verse 3 says, the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? And so in verse 3, we see the truth of Proverbs 16:18, where pride comes before the fall, right? And which I actually misquoted there. In Proverbs 6, we know pride was one of the things that God hates, and we know a heart that Proverbs 6 verse or 16:18 rather. A pride, was it a proud look? Pride goeth before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. I wanted to make sure to read that because people misquote that, just like I just did. It's not pride goes before a fall, it's pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And that's what's going on, not only in Edom here, but in every nation that rejects God, okay? In every person that rejects God. The reason why they do it is because of pride, because they think themselves higher than what they are. They think, I don't need God. I don't need the life that he gives. I don't need the earth that he created for us. I don't need the salvation he offers. I can do it on my own. And in this rebelliousness, God says, fine, you don't want it, you're not going to get it. And they get judgment, they get death, and they get destruction. Okay? Obadiah 3, this is what's happening in Edom here. Again, the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee. They think they've made it. And yet, they think they've conquered their enemy, Israel. And yet their pride has deceived them. That's what God says. And so it says, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. The clefts of the rock there references where Edom was at. I drew mountains last week, and I explained a little bit that the Edom was in a place, a mountainous country. It wasn't a green country of plains and grass. It was a mountainous country where now you may have heard of the town Petra, where you've seen pictures of the giant cliffs, and they've carved the city into the stones. Remember the movie Indiana Jones, where they went into the stone city there? That's what made it famous. But that comes from this place in Edom, okay, where they built the cities in the mountains, and they prided themselves in that because mountains is where people went to protect themselves from their enemies when they used to fight wars with chariots and bow and arrows and fist fights and that sort of thing, you'd go to a place where they couldn't get you. High places, mountains. All right. Now we're shooting rockets and everything else and airplanes. That doesn't really help too much. But they're hiding in the mountains in Obadiah verse 3, and not just hiding there, but they're ruling from there. Okay. And so thou dwellest in the clefts of the rock, and that gives them their security, that they're in the mountain, that they have this secure fortress of stone, a natural fortress. And yet God says this is a deception. You think you're safe, you think you're secure, and yet you're not. Okay, and he's hinting at the fact that they're under God's disapproval here. Okay, so then the clefts of the rock, which deals with their location. It's also interesting that we'll get here in a little bit that the clefts of the rock is where people go to hide from God's judgment in Revelation. Remember Revelation 6, when God's judgment starts to be poured out, and the people go hide in the caves. People think they can get security through the strongest thing on the planet, which are rocks. Okay, and yet they can't. Okay, God sees the secret places. He sees where you're hiding. He sees the depths of your heart and your mind. And so the clefts of the rock are not a guard, not a defense against righteousness, against God. Okay, and so Edom and their inhabitants dwell in the clefts of the rock. Their habitation is high, which again is speaking where they're at geographically, but also in their heart. They think of themselves as higher than the need to submit to God, which is why they're rejecting his people. And so they say in their heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Now, when it says their habitation is high, that kind of reminded me, and it should remind you of Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, where we battle today against those in high places, but it's not those who are in the mountains, okay? There's spiritual wickedness in high places. It's talking about principalities and powers and places and heavenly places in the darkness, okay? So we're fighting invisible principalities and powers that are in high places. Here, the Edomites were in literal earthly high places, okay? This is the battle many people fight today. Earthly dominion, earthly kingdoms, those in high places and seats and thrones on the earth. That's not our battle. We're not battling flesh and blood. God here is battling flesh and blood. You see the difference. Okay, Ephesians 6, verse 12, when Paul says we battle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and powers and authorities and spiritual wickedness in high places. Obadiah 1:3, God is fighting flesh and blood people. All right? We have a different orientation against battling with the Lord today. Here he's calling people to physically battle against other flesh and blood people. Today, we don't have that call. We're not calling flesh and blood to battle against flesh and blood. We're calling people to the gospel of peace, the gospel of the grace of God. Okay? But the Edomites here are asking the question in their heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? We're so high, we have so much authority, so much power, who will bring us down? And of course, this has been the hubris of every great empire in history, every great nation in history, is that they get to a point where they think, hey, we're so great, nobody can defeat us, and all of a sudden they go down. And so the proverb bears out in history. But they're asking, who shall bring me down to the ground? The answer will be God. He's going to describe how he's going to destroy them and bring them down. Isaiah 2 describes how God, when he comes back and sets up his kingdom on Mount Zion, he will take the high places and make them low, and the low places and make them high. And so Israel, who has been condemned and despised throughout history, will be made the highest nation. And those nations who have ruled over Israel, those who have oppressed Israel, will be made low and be the lowest nations. Which should give you some insight to Jesus' teaching in Matthew that if you want to be first, you need to be last. If you want to be last, you need to be first. Right? He's dealing there with the same Abrahamic promise of blessing and cursing to his people that he's dealing with Obadiah with. Okay? So, back to Obadiah verse 4. It says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. You think you're so high? You think the clefts of the rock are protecting you? I'm going to bring you down from those clefts. I'm going to bring you down. You think you're like an eagle that flies high above everyone else and is protected from everyone. I'm going to shoot you down. That's what he says. Your nest is up there in the mountains. It says, thy nest is among the stars. It says, thence will I bring them down. Now, an eagle in the Bible, of course, is always a sign of superior strength. Eagles in the Bible are those who nest in high places so no one can disturb them, as opposed to those birds that nest down low where animals can eat their eggs and that sort of thing. Eagles also are very strong. They're swift when they attack. They're around the dead things. In the Bible, eagles also refer to vultures and that sort of thing, that eat up the dead things. And so they're the ones that have that sort of control. And so God refers to himself as an eagle when he comes back in judgment against Edom. He says that he bore Israel on eagle's wings. Remember that? What does that mean? Well, eagle flies high. So here's Israel. They're being oppressed by Egypt. He bears them on eagle's wings and gets them out of there. He saves them. He puts them on their wings and flies away. He delivers them. And so here, Edom thinks they're like an eagle. They think their nest is among the stars. There's no way anybody can bring us down. And God says, I will bring thee down, saith the Lord. So God can and he will. Back in Proverbs and Job, I left some verses there for your reference, how eagles are described as those in the heavens, as those who fly up in the sky. This was before the Wright brothers and all that. So figuring out the way of the eagle was something that is a wonderful thing. And just in the last century, we've figured something out. And even then, even though we've got these airplanes, we still can't do the things birds can, which is quite fascinating. We stick a metal tube in the air with two flaps out the end, and then we think that's a bird. And you see things birds do. That's amazing. The way they land, the way they take off, the way they turn in midair, and that sort of thing. So Proverbs 30:19 is correct when it says there are three things that are wonderful that we can't know, and that's the way of the bird and the sky, the way of the eagle in the sky. So it's fascinating. But Obadiah verse 4, Edom thinks they're an eagle that cannot be touched. Okay, their nest is among the stars, which I don't want to give you too much speculation here, but again, that should remind us of someone else who tries to make their nest among the stars and says, I'm higher than the stars, and you won't bring me down. You may remember Satan saying that in Isaiah 14, and Lucifer saying that. Over in Isaiah chapter 14, it describes Satan's agenda, or at least his thoughts against God, in a prophecy about an earthly king of Babylon who thought himself to be like Lucifer. Isaiah 14 verse 12 says, How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. And of course, we know stars of God are not just the stars in the sky, they're angels. Okay, they're authorities in heaven. And so the stars of God, they think we're going to exalt our throne up there. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. So these are people who are saying, God exists, he's there, but Lucifer says, I'm going to be like him. And I'm going to be right there with him. It'll be like God 1, God 2. There I am. Well, first commandment, there's only one God. There's no other God but him, and he's above all things. Okay, so that is the sin of man, the first sin of man, the first sin of the devil, is that we can be like God. So we don't need him. We don't need to thank him. Now that we can breathe, we can do it on our own. You can't. Okay, we need God to live. We need God to have everlasting life. We need God for nothing more than the fact that he is goodness. And so if we're going to be good, if we're going to be holy, we're infringing on his copyright. Okay, that's who he is. And so we copy ourselves after him. Meanwhile, Obadiah verse 4 has a reference there to them being among the stars, and God's going to bring them down. Could be an allusion to God bringing down all those high places, including the devil. Okay, over in Revelation when he comes down from heaven and he brings down those authorities, those evil authorities, and he casts down those authorities on the earth. In verse 5 it says, If thieves come to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hid things sought up? So he describes here, if thieves and robbers come to you at night, and then he kind of relishes in the fact that if they're coming to you at night, they're going to destroy you anyway, which is a justice thing. But he says, if they come, would they not have stolen till they had enough, and then they'd leave some things there? If grape gatherers came to thee, wouldn't they not leave some grapes? That they wouldn't take all the grapes, they would leave some. There'd be some left behind. Thieves don't take everything you own. And yet God says, I will search out the hidden things of Esau and take them. I will destroy everything. Okay? And we're going to see next week the reason why he gives this curse. It's because this is exactly what Edom did to Israel. When they were down, Edom beat them some more. Okay? And so it wasn't that they showed any mercy to Israel. In the same way, God's not going to show any mercy to them. Okay? And so when it says here the thing about the thieves and about the the grape gatherers. This is dealing with God's judgment on Edom. In verse, let's look at Jeremiah 49. We'll get some more hint at this. Jeremiah chapter 49. I told you last week that there are 5 or 6 verses in Obadiah quoted in Jeremiah 49, which also has a prophecy against Edom. Okay. So in Jeremiah 49, we're going to drop down to verse 7, where it says, "Concerning Edom, thus saith the Lord of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman?" You may recall, if you studied Job recently, that Eliphaz, one of the 3 wise friends of Job, was a Temanite. He was from the land of Edom. Job was from the land of Uz, which is near Edom over here. And so Jeremiah is saying, is there no more wisdom in Teman? Is counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished? Edom was considered a nation of wise people at one point, not necessarily wise for God, but wise in the world. And he says, "Flee ye, turn back, dwell deep, O inhabitants of Dedan, for I will bring the calamity of Esau upon him, the time that I will visit him. If grape gatherers come to thee, would they not have some gleaning grapes?" Gleaning grapes, grapes they leave behind for the gleaners. "If thieves by night, they will destroy till they have enough, and then they'll leave," right? When they have enough, and they'll leave some. "But I have made Esau bare. I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, his brethren his neighbors, and he is not. Leave thy fatherless children, I will preserve them alive, and let thy widows trust in me. For thus saith the Lord, Behold, they whose judgment was not to drink of the cup have assuredly drunken. And art thou he that shall together go unpunished? Thou shalt not go unpunished, but thou shalt surely drink of it." And so he says in verse 13, "I have sworn by myself, saith the Lord, that Bozrah," which was the capital of Edom, "shall become a desolation, a reproach, a waste, and a curse. And all the cities thereof shall be perpetual wastes." And then in verse 14, he begins Obadiah verse 1. "I heard a rumor from the Lord, an ambassador sent among the heathen." He starts quoting Obadiah. He's talking about the curse of Edom. And you notice what he said there about the grape gatherers and the thieves. They leave things behind. I mean, you get hit by a thief, it's a bad thing, but you still got your nest egg. You still got things in your mattress. God's not going to leave anything behind for Esau. He's going to lay it bare. And in fact, a lot of people point to a fulfillment, at least a partial fulfillment of this prophecy today, when you look at the land where the Edomites were at, such a mighty people, and there's nothing there. That city of Petra that Indiana Jones was searching through, there's nobody there. It's dust, and there's wild animals living there, so there's nothing there. And so it's amazing how some of these things happen, and a lot of these nations in the Old Testament aren't there, and yet there are still a people that claim to be Israel around. All right, and so you have that type of thing people promote. But back in Jeremiah 49, in verse 14 through 22, we see Jeremiah repeats Obadiah here, and down in verse 22 in Jeremiah 49, it says, "Behold, he shall come up and fly as the eagle, and spread his wings over Bozrah. And at that day shall the heart of the mighty men of Edom be as the heart of a woman in her pangs." And so screams of childbirth, right? Screaming like a woman here. And so that's what's going to happen when God comes to judge Edom. It also says in verse 21, the noise will be like the noise heard in the Red Sea when God destroyed the army of the Egyptians. There's no more. There's nothing left. Okay? And so that's the idea in Obadiah. Look back to Obadiah verse 6. Move on down here through the passage, 6 and 7. "The secret things of Esau are searched out, his hidden things are sought up, and of course destroyed and taken," as we saw in Jeremiah 49. Verse 7 says, "All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee," which is a quote of the Psalms. It says, "There is none understanding in him." And so in verse 7 it says there's a confederacy of people, there's your allies, there's a group of nations that Edom dealt with in confederacy against Israel, against the smaller nations, and God says, your confederate nations, they're going to hurt you, they're going to turn on you, they're going to deceive you. So you think you're the leader bringing these people together, you're going to be the one destroyed, okay? And they're going to cause you trouble. And so those that eat thy bread, they're in your house, planning with you, eating your bread, your friends, your allies, they're going to turn against you. There's no understanding in them, okay, in him. And so if you look at Psalm 83 quickly, you'll see Psalm 83 describes the names of these confederate nations, okay? and we'll get more into this next week as well. Psalm 83 says, "Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace. Be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lift up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, and the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance." So you see here a phrase that is so often in our discussions and the headlines even today, where there are nations calling for the destruction of Israel and that sort of thing, not knowing that they have no spiritual standing with God in this dispensation. But Psalm 83 verse 4, there were people back then who were saying, "Come and let us cut them off from being a nation." And that's because the imaginations, as it's been said before, the imaginations of wicked people, the imaginations of sinful people are satanically inspired. Okay, and by that I mean Satan had a plan to lift himself up like God. Satan has a plan to be against God's purposes, and Israel is God's name, is God's people, and Satan will be against that, which means that unsaved humanity, those who rebel against God, will be against God's purposes. So in Psalm 83 verse 4, they were against his nation. They did not want to have remembrance of it. Verse 5 says, "For they have consulted together with one consent." That's confederacy. They came together, they consented, and they are confederate against thee, God. The tabernacles of, here's the names, tabernacles of Edom, number one on the list. Ishmaelites, which we covered last week from Ishmael, Hagar. The Moabites, which are Lot's daughter's bastard children, right? The Hagarenes from Hagar. Gebal and Ammon. Ammon was one of Lot's children. The Amalekites, the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre, and so on and so forth. It says in verse 9, "Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin, at the brook of Kison." He says, "Do unto them as to all the enemies you destroyed before." Remember the story of Jabin and Sisera. Sisera, as we may recall, where they were captive to Jabin, okay, the king, and then God rose up Deborah, the woman judge there, and delivered Israel from them. And Sisera, the chief military leader there, came and ran and hid to the wife of one of the chief military officers in Israel. And her name was Jael. Remember that? And so Sisera lays down, and Jael gives him some milk and says, "I'll hide you from the soldiers." And when he lays down to go to sleep, Jael drives a stake through his head. And so Psalm 83 says, treat them like Sisera, treat them like Jabin, destroy them, stop them. And so David here, or Asaph rather, is bringing to recollection what God did to deliver Israel in time past. It says, do the same to these people because they're confederate against you. Okay, they've conspired against us, and they've taken our things. Look at Psalm 137. You'll see another psalm about Edom specifically and their treachery against God's people. Now again, remember, this is what makes these statements different than any other nation is that God hath not dealt with any nation like he has with Israel. Okay, these are God's people. God was with them. So when they attacked Israel, they were attacking God himself and what he was doing. Psalm 137, verse 7. "Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem." In the day of Jerusalem's destruction, that is, when Jeremiah was writing about their destruction, the Edomites conspired to help Nebuchadnezzar destroy them. He says, "Remember the children of Edom, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof." And so when Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the city, tore down the walls of Jerusalem, and obviously they had won the battle, here are the Edomites saying, destroy everything. Not one stone upon another, right? Raise it. Let's destroy the whole thing. And so they kept pushing, having no mercy against the Israelites, to the extent of even taking their children and killing their children against the stones and that sort of thing, which is why verse 9 says, "Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones," because that would be eye for an eye, right? That would be what the Edomites did to Israel. And so what a shameful thing that they did to God's people, deserving God's judgment here. So back to Obadiah, verse 8, verse 7 and 8. Obadiah says, "Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau?" Because of, we've already read so many things that they've done already, but we'll learn more next week about that. "And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter." And so because of their pride, because of their confederacy, because of what they're doing here to Israel, God gives a curse to them, and he says that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. Okay, they're going to be destroyed. And the next verse there will lead us into next week. And where it says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever." Okay? There's a reason why God gives judgment in the Old Testament. There's a reason why God has so much to say in prophecy against Edom, and why Malachi 1 and Romans 9 it says God hated Esau, because Esau hated God. Okay? And so he's going to get his recompense for his works. All right? We'll stop there for tonight. I know I left a few passages left undealt with, but I trust that you can study those on your own. They will definitely come up again in Obadiah, talking about how the Lord, when he does return in judgment, is going to come back and he's going to bathe his sword in the blood of Edomia before he comes back to Israel. He's going to lay them low before he raises up the kingdom of Israel. And Isaiah 63 talks about that. So we'll deal with that a little bit later. All right, any questions, any thoughts about that?
All right, so that will conclude that lesson there, and tomorrow we'll start at verse 9 and through 15, and that will be Wednesday night and Thursday night. All right, so I'll just get out the way, and y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's evening.